record and get started. So welcome everyone to our 3 o'clock session today for the 2025 Access, Innovation, and Disability Symposium. We're so excited everyone's here today, despite this difficult timing during the day. Funding for the symposium was made possible through CU Boulder's Impact Grant, the Office for Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences, the CU Libraries, and the Be Well program. My name is Liz Novosel, and I'm a member of the symposium's planning committee. I'm also a librarian here on campus. I don't think we have anyone I need to give a physical description for, but I do have brown and gray shoulder-length hair, glasses, I'm white, and wearing a sweatshirt. So before I introduce today's presenter, I would like to remind everyone to stay muted during the presentation. Closed captioning is available by clicking the CC button. Do feel free to use the chat or your reaction emojis during the presentation for interacting with each other and the presenter. At the end of the session, there will be a discussion period and you'll be able to unmute and talk at that time. I also wanted to just put a little shout out for tomorrow is our keynote address with Hayden Crystal. It's entitled The Importance of Intersectional Accessibility. And Hayden is a Colorado-based deaf queer activist and stand-up comedian. There will also be a watch party in Norland Library hosted by moi. There'll be a social gathering with gluten-free snacks from 12:30 to 3. So there's a big screen in there. We'll be watching. It's in the Center for British and Irish Studies, which if you know Norland Library at all, it's the big fancy room at the top 5th floor, which you get to from the elevators or the stairs on the west side towards the quad of the building. So thank you for joining us today for this presentation. Its title is Silly in the Summer, Near-Peer-Led Career and Technical Community-Based Differentiated Learning and Research at Idea Academy, Boston, and it is presented by Hayes Hart Thompson. The session presents IDEA, a 3-week, low-cost to no-cost summer program designed to expand post-secondary access for underserved high school students, particularly those who are neurodivergent, first generation, or students of color. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter. Hayes Hart Thompson is a graduate student in health and educational geography at the University of Colorado Boulder and a Boston University alum with degrees in anthropology and film and television. They are a graduate research assistant at the Institute of Behavioral Science, where their work examines how neighborhood-built and social environments shape the lives of young people across the life course. Hayes is also the executive director of the Stateless Collective, a Boston-based nonprofit that expands access to innovation and career-focused education for minority youth and supports youth-led research in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Boston. Okay, so I am going to, with no further ado, hand it off to Hayes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate it. My name is Hayes Hart Thompson. I use they, them pronouns, and I'll just give a quick description. Short brown hair, glasses, I'm wearing a collared shirt. I'm super excited to speak with you all about this program and how it interacts deeply with access overall and access in education. So just quickly to kind of tell you where I'm coming from today and kind of my positionality is I was previously a public school educator in the Boston area before coming to CU Boulder. I'm a queer community member. It's a huge part of who I am. I'm also someone with ADHD and learning disabilities. So this interest in neurodivergence also comes from understanding how I learn and connecting with young folks that share those learning disabilities. I'm also a community engaged research scholar and work mainly in health and education geography. So that's kind of where I'm coming from the lens of how I'm approaching this conversation. So what's really key to the beginning of this conversation is what's referred to as the critical aspiration gap. It might also be called the attainment aspiration gap or the aspiration pursuit gap in a lot of the literature. And essentially what that means is that young folks being able to aspire and understanding what that aspiration looks like, and whether they're able to attain that future or pursue that future, and focusing on kind of critical scholarship around it kind of complicates those ideas of attainment and pursuit of different futures and who actually gets to pursue many of those futures. What we see with a lot of students that come from a minority background or generally neurodiverse backgrounds is that self-perception of the ability often explains aspirations better than attainment. So students might have greater aspirations than, say, what it looks like their resume is presenting or the classes that they're taking. And so they're not necessarily limited by what they're able to access. And so we want to be able to close the gap in their skill base and what they're able to attain with those aspirations, so they're able to fully reach the goals that they have for themselves. But they might not know what's attainable, and they might not know what it takes to get to the aspiration that they have focused on. So that's kind of the core of when we look at the literature and we look at what students are experiencing, how those tie together to create a program that I'm going to talk about today. So Idea Academy that was referenced earlier is a 3-week intensive program. And it's based in Boston, and it really focuses on skill building, innovation mindset, and overall non-traditional learning. And the goal is it's all at a collegiate level, still accessible to students, but you're still teaching up to things that we would most likely see, whether it be softwares, topics, or projects that you would be more likely to see in a college classroom. And the goal is that students are getting those educational skills, but really getting what we refer to as a hiker's toolbox, right? So things that are not necessarily seen as tangible skills, but often are ignored, or that it's assumed that some students might already know these things or have some of those social skills that can really move you forward in professional development. So making sure we kind of get a holistic view of how to prepare students for the next mountain in their life is how we'll often say it. Students are often 9th and 11th graders. 70% of them receive full scholarships in 2025. If they don't receive a scholarship, it's about $300. It just pays for materials for the whole 3 weeks, not per week. So $300 for the whole week. Mainly that's just to pay for materials, but most students get that covered. And the idea is to really kind of have this adaptive, access-focused learning style. Everything is hands-on, and we use a near peer-led model. I'll talk about who those peers are that are leading them. And really, it's a focus on mutual aid between folks in the Boston area and students in the Boston area, and really identity-affirming mentorship. So students that likely came from their community background or have some sort of shared experience that might be able to really talk to what that looks like for them. A huge part of where students are coming from are STEM and innovation pathways. So a lot of times when we communicate programming, it is communicated as STEM. But I would say coming from a humanities and social science background, that isn't everything we do. And nearly all the students that attend identify as neurodivergent. Looking at this conversation of access, I just wanted to bring in briefly some conversation that is often as a health geographer that we see in health geography when we look at healthcare access. So it's availability, accommodation, affordability, acceptability, accountability, accessibility, and what's being added recently, so recent that there is actually no full paper about it yet, is awareness. So that was added by mainly Sauerman and Jenkins out of Penn State to kind of bring to the conversation that this is all great, but if students are not aware of things, or, and again, in the healthcare setting, they're not aware of certain resources, accessibility kind of goes out the window. So as health geographers kind of pulling this out of the healthcare system, looking at education, this becomes a conversation about social infrastructure. And it's really key to see a program like this, not just as college attainment or not just career readiness, but really as social infrastructure for these students. Many of these students, the only other option is sitting at home. That's what summer looks like. Maybe getting a job if they're able to access that, if they have, immigration status that allows them to hold a job, to open a bank account. And a lot of that is not possible for these students. So this becomes a really key social infrastructure and third space for them to be able to access joining us. And so when we think about these spaces, not just as educational spaces, but as social spaces, it really changes our conversation about what that access looks like. So we talk about the near peer model. We're looking at the individuals that are teaching our students. So Again, this is usually an alternative for being home. And these staff members tend to be of ages about 20 to 26, and they receive a living wage for the summer. So in Boston, it's about $15 an hour. These students receive about $27 to $30 an hour, depending on their experience, background, and their age as well. So the real goal is not just to pay these individuals, but pay these individuals a living wage so they're able to focus on this work. They would also be able to pay their rent, right? We are really holistic around thinking about our students, and we think about our staff in the same way. So there's a huge component, not just to our younger high school students, but to the support that we allow our staff. So a lot of our funding from the city of Boston has been in youth development for those staff members, not just the students. So we really think about it as two programs and think about that holistic access. And a huge part of that is enough money to live, right? And so that's really critical to us, is that it's as free as possible for our students, but also making sure it's accessible to the staff. So we get staff members that often share those backgrounds and don't have the funds to live in the summer any other way. So those individuals are often not education major. So they're individuals that are coming from a shared background with students often, whether they're from similar schools to students in the Boston area. We have predominantly students of color and queer students, so a lot of our staff reflect that naturally. And so they come for about 30 plus hours of training with our executive team, and they co-develop curriculum that reflects neurodiverse needs. And what that looks like is making sure that we're not only training staff, but we're training them in usually universal design for learning. But also that looks like how the physical space of this, again, social infrastructure acts. So whether it's flexible seating and movement norms, non-lecture format, we are like anything but lecture. Obviously there's a time and a place for a lecture. Summer with, a bunch of 16-year-olds is not the place for a lecture. And really leaning on creative collaborative design through that experiential learning that really centers student agency. And that takes a lot of time. So they're paid for those 30 hours because having that ability to, number one, learn how to be an educator, learn how to build a curriculum, and then learn how to make sure that that curriculum is accessible to folks in all facets is really, really, it takes a lot of time, especially if education is not your area of focus. So that's kind of what our staff near peer model looks like. Is these are students that often are maybe a 5-year difference from our students that are coming in. Most of our staff sit around the 22 age range. So that means that, 5 years ago, a lot of them were these students, potentially in their exact situations. So rather than just kind of continue to talk at you, I want to give you a day in the life of what it looks like to be a student at Idea Academy, and what these touch points of access and I would say disability community look like. So we have our A block. So student shows up, sometimes late, sometimes early. We try to get there on both ends. We have a homeroom to make sure we catch students at all times. And so students are placed in 4 cohorts. They self-place themselves. So that can look like health and psychology, computer science and AI, manufacturing and engineering, and business and financial literacy. So students place themselves in those. It usually is no more than about 10 students. So we keep it very, very small. Sometimes we hit a little closer to 15, but we keep it really small so that our student to staff ratio is something that's students can get as many touch points as they really need. We really want to disrupt that classic classroom model. So we try to do a lot of hands-on learning in our health class. We would have individuals come in and be a case study. So their health class this summer, it was a hospital that they would come into, and we would have patients come in, whether they had something that was, health looks like mental and physical concerns. And so students understanding how to engage with those ideas. And also the ability to move freely. The ability to move freely. And sitting in chairs is not necessarily a requirement. Students are encouraged to move physically and engage in their space. But students that need consistency and predictable spaces, there's also space for that. So that takes a lot of time, again, for our staff to set up. But also we have floaters that move through classrooms to make sure this is possible. Because sometimes you're not able to accommodate both of those simultaneously. And it looks like staff support as well, especially because, again, these are not always teachers. So having individuals that can float and support for those diverse needs is really, really key. And after your A block, you now have your B block. Your B block looks like analyzing and creating. It's really kind of taking the information from the morning and applying it. And this is a really kind of focus on college and career readiness. And it's a really low risk space to explore. A lot of times these spaces for college and career readiness can be really anxiety provoking, and students start to shut down mentally, because it doesn't feel like something that's maybe attainable to them, accessible to them. They might not feel smart enough, or that they have, I think a lot of folks, this is totally speaking from personal experience, a lot of young folks with ADHD are told that they are not smart enough or they're not capable enough. And so these can seem like really scary conversations. And so the goal is that this becomes a low risk space to explore these future options, that there's not a stressor or a need to figure it out or an expectation of a direct path, but really for you to just try something new, and maybe fail at it. Actually, we want you to fail at it. So that's kind of what the goal of this space is. And one of kind of the things that we appreciate the most is we'll have these cohorts mixed together and have students act as subject matter experts. So this can look like our manufacturing engineering team, who has been learning 3D printing, meeting with our health and psychology team and developing 3D printed accessible technology. So our health students will come in with a knowledge of different disabilities, physical disabilities, and our 3D printing team will come in with that 3D printing background. And students have the opportunity, the really unique opportunity, to become a subject matter expert in their teams. It builds a lot of their confidence, but it also helps them understand their role, and kind of what that looks like to work as a team in a way that feels very accessible, because you can understand kind of how you can step into the space and how you can kind of lend your knowledge. And that's what students kind of express to us as some of their favorite things, is becoming that subject matter expert is something that really increases their confidence. And also they're potentially students that really need to understand what their role is on a team, gives them a strong sense of what that role looks like. And then you have lunch. Students actually love lunch. It's not just because they get to escape us. Is we try to give them a full hour. We've tried to make it 30 minutes, and the hours are a really beautiful thing for a lot of different reasons. Our program coordinators will rotate engaging with students, so not monitoring them. That's really important to us. And that looks like maybe playing Jenga in between things, chatting about their majors. I couldn't find the photo, a really great photo of one of our program coordinators teaching another student how to play piano, and all the other kids around watching them play piano. So these little kind of small moments that are not structured, but still feel kind of safe with people that they trust, are a really great moment for students to make those connections. Because our students this past year came from 27 different schools. So that's immediately daunting, especially for our students with social anxiety. And that's what we get often is the thing they're most nervous about, because we do that pre-survey. Nearly every single student says, I'm not going to make friends. I feel like I'm too quiet. I don't know how to reach out. So this becomes a kind of unstructured space where students can start to invite folks to maybe eat lunch with them. But if a student doesn't actually have someone to eat lunch, our program coordinators can kind of pick up that communication and start connecting students that they see would be a good fit for friendship. It also builds students' college skills. Very rarely do high school students have unstructured time where they're trusted in a space. So they're trusted to navigate a city and look for lunch and explore that. So we give them a lot of kind of what I would refer to as training, but we set them up with maps and information about where things are. We walk through what foods are available. We talk about looking both ways when crossing the train tracks, little things like that, that can make a city really daunting for students, whether they live in the city or not. Having that understructured time gives them a challenge and that space to explore and really feel like an adult for the first time. Where, as a student, they're constantly being monitored. This opportunity to be trusted and trusted to be an adult, again, is a really huge part of the confidence building. And when students come back to us, we have daily stand-up. This is kind of mimicking in the tech world, daily stand-up, where we're exploring project management skills, and really building brainstorming capacity. We know computers are in front of us. There's no AI. So we really want students to start tapping into that creativity, and kind of give them tangible strategies for identifying and pursuing problems. Again, things can be really overwhelming. So giving them those tangible strategies for how to problem solve, how to work through. We get students with really big problems saying, I want to cure cancer. And we have students that are like, I want to figure out what I want for lunch today. And that difference, right? And figuring out what can we do in 3 weeks and helping them size to something that feels accessible to them, without kind of saying we can't do what you want to do. And really kind of helping them understand those tangible strategies. A huge focus is also executive functioning skills. I would say that at the core of this programming, that's really what students are struggling with and walk out with. Whether that looks like executive functioning with, say, task activation or time management, or that looks like, again, being able to size what a project looks like, not being overwhelmed by certain activities. A huge focus is helping students understand what skills they need to build to track and manage themselves. Because we know that whether they're going directly into the workforce, they're going to trade school, they're going to college, executive functioning is one of the things that's going to keep them on track the most for careers. And if we can help those students that are maybe not getting that at school, that struggle with kind of typical styles of executive functioning, that's one thing that we really want them to walk away with. Additionally, naturally we get into public speaking, and usually it's very casual and we kind of work our way up to more formal, but it gives students, of all different comfort levels, the ability to start learning how to publicly speak. There's also a lot of safety nets for students that struggle with auditory processing or have social anxiety, to kind of put them in that stretch zone, without making them feel like too overwhelmed or feel like it's a failure if they make a mistake. So we kind of set up those safety nets so students feel like they can start stepping into that stretch zone, whatever that looks like for them. And lastly, at the end of the day, we have what we call our innovation trailheads. And that's when students choose their own specific projects. And this is what a lot of students come to us for, is the excitement to be able to focus on a special interest that doesn't have space anywhere else in their life. Or if it does, they have no idea how to do it. And so what that looks like is a lot of mentorship from our program coordinators, many of which come from multi-skilled backgrounds. So when we hire folks, we usually look for folks that might have multiple majors or have a major and work in a different area, or maybe they're pursuing a master's degree with a different undergrad degree. So it allows students to have multiple different avenues to look at a project, but also help them understand that a lot of the things that they're passionate about can be turned into tangible solutions. There's also a lot of tracking support. I mentioned that executive functioning earlier on. So we have them build the executive functioning skills they can, but staff also supports in that tracking and time management, so students can make mistakes without feeling like they're setting themselves back. Because that can be a really quick stressor for students when they feel like, a project feels too big, they wasted time one day and it's all over. There's no way they're going to figure it out. And the thing they were super passionate about, they're never going to do it, and they're going to look ridiculous on the final day. And being able to have that safety net for students to start learning those skills without feeling like they've set themselves behind and kind of crushing their confidence helps them slowly begin to build up those executive functioning skills instead of all at once. We also have a rotating mentor model where we assign that core mentor, usually in relation to whatever topic they're deciding to cover, whether it's something physical. Some students choose policies, some students choose podcasts, media. Sometimes it's apps. There's such a variety in what students choose. It's really incredible what they come up with. But having essentially a ticketing system where they're able to put in for certain things they need allows our staff to rotate with them still having a solid person that always knows what's going on with them. And that rotating mentorship model works really well. It means a very chaotic last hour of the day. But it's really, even at the end of it, even if you're exhausted from going to, 10 different kids in an hour, it's really, really fun. And it's our students' favorite time of the day, and our staff, when they walk out at the end of the 3 weeks, when they've been exhausted every single day, it's one of their favorite parts of the day too. So what does the result look like? We do a massive demo day where students present and showcase their projects. We help them design one-pagers. We talk a lot about accessible design for those one-pagers. We talk about readability. We try to make sure that early on, when they're understanding user experience, that we make sure that not only is it visually accessible, but thinking about word choice, right? You don't know who you're going to present this to. So we really bake these conversations into everything we do with students, not only on the staff level, we try to help it trickle down, right? Because these students are going to become educators in some capacity in their life later. So if we can start building these skills early, if they can see how it might help them and help their peers, we want to do more of that. And what we found, without kind of directing students, I think a lot of students come from a neurodiverse and disability-based background. A lot of our students address disability-related challenges, whether it's mobility access, a teddy bear that translates in Quechua. That was really, really cool this year. That was probably my favorite project. Not that I have favorites, but that was really cool. Whether it looks like inclusive ADHD health curricula for schools and making sure that there's more conversations about different neurodiversity and health curriculum, or a podcast for immigrant students. So we get, again, massive variety, but the real goal is that every student, again, at this event feels like a subject matter expert, that when parents, when community members, when teachers walk up to their table, they're in the driver's seat and they know something none of us know. That confidence boost that comes from that student feeling like deeply smart and capable, is something that every single year we have parents, teachers, and students come up to us as like, that is the thing that kind of is the most important to them, as their confidence grew exponentially. But some students have said to us, and it's really tough to hear this, but also on a positive note, is like, this is the first time I felt smart. This is the first time that I felt like I'm a capable student. And it's hard to hear that they have not experienced previously, but it's really exciting that they have an opportunity to understand how capable and smart they are if they just look at their education a little bit differently and shift how they consider solving problems in the world, and maybe thinking about what problems they want to pursue in their post-secondary options. This is my favorite day every single year. And day like 14, I'm like, I'm never doing this again. This is so exhausting. And then 15 comes and we do this. And I realize how much this is just, fabulous. The kids really produce amazing things. They're really happy. And I'm like, okay, I could probably do it again next year. So absolutely, we're doing it in 2026. So this is just a really brilliant day to bring folks in and have students really build their confidence with their ability to present. We do it on a college campus, on Boston University's campus. So it also allows students to really put themselves in the shoes of, a four-year university if that's what they want to pursue. A lot of students don't know if college is for them. And so to see themselves presenting as subject matter experts on a college campus really helps them understand that they are capable and they have the opportunity to access whatever type of education is best for them. In terms of what we look at, we try to collect as much data as possible. This is kind of more of our quantitative data. There's around this past year, about 78% discovered or decided to pursue a new major or field of study than they had originally anticipated. Again, whether that looks like a field of study in terms of going to trade school or jumping right into their careers or a different major. 62% stated that their confidence had significantly increased following the program. So it's about an 8+ on a Likert scale. 73% are interested in returning summer 26 with 0 changings, exactly how it is. Most of the rest of the students are seniors and their comments are very sweet. I'm a senior, I can't come back next year. So we found that a lot of students do want to make the space and time to come back because it is unique every single year. And about 84% like their style of teaching significantly more than typical teaching. So we kind of list that as lecture style, what you see in school, but 7+ on the Likert scale. So we get, I would say, pretty positive success outcomes on what areas we're trying to focus on. In terms of our qualitative data, I'll kind of let you look around this, but a lot of the comments that students are making are about that near peer connection. And I think understanding that is caring for community members and having these young adults that are stepping into these program coordinator roles, caring about younger folks that share their background, and those younger folks understanding that they are cared for, that they are heard, right? This might be the first time that they say, I have this great idea. And instead of a teacher saying, awesome, go write it down, or like, go sit over there and do the project, right? Not in any judgment toward teachers. I was a teacher with, a 30-person classroom. You don't have time and space. There's no way. So this might be the first time where a teacher is able to sit down with them and be like, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's really get into what you're talking about, because this is the first time they've had a class small enough. A lot of these students are coming from public schools that are massive. There might just not be the capacity. And then you have folks, again, I keep bringing up competence because I think that that is really the main marker that we've seen every single year be a core tenet, and truly a core tenet of access and aspiration is when students understand that they are capable. And capability looks different for every student, but they understand for them that capacity is specific to what they're interested in doing. We have a student here, which I really love this quote, is I first came in thinking I may not be smart enough and I may not be able to make friends. But after 3 weeks, I've met some great people who are just like me and have had very memorable experiences. I think that that's incredibly meaningful to me because of that social infrastructure. Coming from a health geographer background, I care about that social aspect of it. But not only are you getting at social infrastructure and social infrastructure that feels accessible to you, but also being able to have that educational focus and being able to balance that, I think, is the strongest part of looking at this design. And so what does this mean for disability, education, and neighborhood research? That's kind of the angle I'm coming at from a research perspective. So one of the core things, and the core things that a lot of literature around, I would say, overall abolition education is curriculum around lived experiences. So staff are actively designing every single day as students shift and they meet the people that are in their classes. We build a curriculum in the summer before students come, and it's going to change. And we tell them it's going to change. So we kind of think about how do we pivot as students bring their lived experiences and issues related to their own neighborhood. It grounds students in accessible ways to approach problems because it affects them, right? If there's, one student focused on a bridge that he was like, it's not walkable. There's no way for anyone to get across this bridge in my neighborhood. So we redesigned the bridge. right? He was able to pull on engineering, he pulled on social design, he looked at interviews from city council. It was incredible what the student did to look at every single aspect of that accessibility that I showed early on, but it was accessible to him because it was something personal to his life. And he was really passionate about building this bridge in a way I've never seen a student passionate about a bridge, because it meant something to him, it meant something to his community. And I think a really other important conversation is we talk a lot about differentiated learning. Obviously, that this is an ideal world. Again, if you have a classroom of 20 kids, differentiated learning is only so possible. But as much as we can think about differentiated learning for all students, I think that's incredibly important, especially when you're looking at students managing adverse childhood experiences. Often, whether they are diagnosed with autism or ADHD or not, they will present with similar symptoms to autism and ADHD in different learning and similar learning styles. So having flexible learning styles for every student, whether they have a disability listed or not, is key to overall success. Because a lot of times students can also not access these diagnoses. Obviously, it depends on their parents' capacity with their medical insurance. It matters what is accessible for that school and maybe how many tests a school psychologist is doing. So understanding that we can look at differentiated learning, not necessarily just for our students that are listed with various diagnoses, but for every student who might present with similar experiences. And lastly, really looking at education as a health exposure. And I use exposure not necessarily in a negative light, but thinking of often in health literature, we see years of schooling as kind of a key component to how healthy a student is going to be later in life, their cognitibility later in life. But thinking about education as a modifiable risk factor in life course health research. And what I mean by that is it's important for us to get more depth in what about the student's education affects their health span and their life course through their entire life. And I think I'm hopeful in my experience as a grad student is hopefully being able to add to that literature and add to that research so we can understand what we can do for kids now to modify those later in life health risks, and really seeing education as a powerful way to do that. And that can look as simple as making sure a student is more confident in what they do so they can pursue aspects of their life that we know support a healthier life in the future. So just to kind of wrap it up, because I gave a lot of information, is that the goal of presentation is really to share a model. It's not a perfect model. It's in progress every single year. We tell the kids we iterate because we encourage them to. Really, it's a model of accessible design, and it has implications for cultivating inclusive post-secondary pipelines, particularly for neurodivergent youth. We look a lot at other post-secondary pipelines like pre-college programs to kind of prepare for what we might want to do differently. And a lot of these programs are not accessible, whether that means financially, whether that means awareness, whether that means folks that were English is not their first language, whether it looks like planning for folks that come with different neurodivergent, needing, differentiated flexible learning. There's not a lot of inclusive post-secondary pipelines, at least in the Boston area. So really kind of changing that conversation around what are the goals of that post-secondary pipelines. Often run by colleges, it's not always the goal of building the student's competence. Often it is to take in significant funds. And some are looking close. Most of the comparable programs are about 7K to 10K for 2 weeks. So that's a whole different conversation about accessibility in terms of funds. And really the goal is that I hope to invite kind of dialogue around mutual aid ecosystems and seeing this near peer conversation as a mutual aid ecosystem where folks are, I think that a lot of our staff shares really great conversations with us at the end of every single we pay them for interviews after where we have them talk about what they would want different and what they've learned from this program. And a lot of them talk about the fact that they've gained respect for educators, and that was a big shift for them, is also understanding that the work that their educators in their life put into their life, but also understanding that you don't have to be a teacher to be an educator, and understanding how they can kind of feed back into that system and also how students taught them as well. And so seeing that as kind of a non-hierarchical mutual aid ecosystem. Explore different forms of differentiated pedagogy and really thinking about identity reflective mentorship that can really transform how students are accessing education, how they see their own access and how they see their own competence in order to attain and aspire to different futures. And I think the biggest part of this is that students are leading us. When we started this, we were students. And so this became an ecosystem of students at different levels, helping and supporting the next generation, and also supporting those folks that have maybe be in college and are going through college, how they can understand the world from a different perspective by younger folks that are experiencing a different period of their life. So I think that's what's really special, is that this is student-led, that it's deeply focused on mentorship and students' confidence building. And I'm really happy to iterate and explore what next summer will look like, and hope every single year we're able to bring as many students into a new version of education that works for them as possible. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to, I know I didn't take the whole time. My goal was really to have some space to talk about this program, but also talk about people's own experience with flexible education and what that attainment and aspiration looks like for them.
Goodness, thank you so much, Hayes. I'm going to stop